Welcome, everyone. My name is Sarah Rathbun. I'm the Director of Marketing and Communications here at Dry Creek Vineyard. I'm so excited to welcome you to this virtual tasting. This one's a little different than ones we've done before, and it really came about because if you have spent more than 5 minutes with either our tasting room manager, Eddy, or our Director of Hospitality and Retail Sales, Robert Conard, you know that these guys love barbecue. They talk about it, they dream about it. That's all that they do when they get home, I swear. And then they come and they tell us about the amazing things that they made and the wines that they paired it with. So we thought it would be so much fun to be able to pick their brains and really kind of figure out what tastes the best, what's the best techniques, and how can you enjoy your Dry Creek Vineyard wines with them. So we're going to get started here in just a second. I do have everybody on mute, and we're going to keep you on mute for just posterity here of just making sure that nobody has their vacuum cleaners going. We don't have doorbells ringing in the background or dogs barking. By all means, if you want to jump in and ask a question, go ahead and unmute yourself. Otherwise, we do have the chat functionality at the bottom. So I'll be your cruise director and be making sure that these guys answer all the questions in the chat. We also have the live transcript button available. So if you want to have kind of computer generated subtitles at the bottom of your screen, please go ahead and do that so you don't miss a word of what these guys are saying. So without further ado, I will go ahead and pass it over to Robert and Ian.
Yay!
Hey, everybody.
So happy to see you guys. I'm so happy to be hanging out with my friend and work associate, Ian Eddy, talking about one of the things that we enjoy most. I don't know about Ian, he can speak for himself, but I know that I've come on the brink of doing tastings at Dry Creek Vineyard where I literally didn't talk about anything other than barbecue. Like we talked about Zinfandel and we talked about barbecue. And so I'm really excited to be able to chat with you tonight about something that's just such a natural pairing. I mean, we, you know, if you've been here and done a tasting with us, when we got to talking about Zinfandel, we inevitably start talking about either grilling or barbecue or some variation thereof. And it's one of the reasons that for me that I love Zinfandel so much. It's just such a diverse wine. It's an American original, which I buy into that wholeheartedly. I mean, we all know that it comes from, you know, Primitivo, but the fact that Zinfandel is native to America and to Sonoma County, to Dry Creek, just makes it all the better. And the fact that it's such a diverse wine, and we chose these wines tonight to kind of show off that as a house, as a winery house. We are a Sauvignon Blanc house. We're Zinfandel, and we are Cabernet and Bordeaux blends, which you guys all know. But for Zinfandels, if you guys haven't been counting, we make 9 different kinds of Zinfandel, and that unique flavor profile from like Wallace being super elegant, very pretty, a really sophisticated Zinfandel, you know, going all the way over to Vogensen and Beeson, which are on the darker, bigger, bolder, more rich. They kind of flirt in the territory of Cabernet Sauvignon style wines. You can pair a lot of different foods with that type of wine. And one of the things that we find as a prevalent trait that keeps reoccurring with Zinfandel is we're always talking about spice. We're talking about whether it's white pepper or cracked black pepper or any number of spices. And we find that these smoky barbecued foods that we like to eat, especially when we play around with barbecue sauce and things like that, that are a little maybe a little sweet or tart or things like that, that they're such an excellent pairing. So for today's tasting, I just love ending my day with 3 glasses of wine in front of me on my desk, and it makes working at a winery all the better. For the 3 wines that we chose for today are Wallace, which I alluded to earlier. One of my favorite Zins, super elegant, very pretty. The spice on Wallace is more along the lines of like white pepper and Asian spice and nothing too bold. And I love this wine because it flirts in the realm of Pinot Noir, where it's very sophisticated and you have to kind of, it doesn't scream at you. You kind of have to be quiet and pay attention. And if you do, there's all kinds of layers to this particular wine. And I think food-wise, it goes with a lot of those same foods that Pinot would go with. Four Clones is one of my other favorite Zinfandels. It lives like right in the center of the pipe as far as like the scope of Zinfandels. It lives along the same lines as Summers Ranch, Spencer's Hill, Four Clones. I find that these wines are all, you know, really classic Dry Creek style Zinfandels. And then we're going to end today with Vogensen, and we're going to talk about the foods and stuff that we do with these. We'll end with Vogensen, which is really on the far end. It's bold, rich. It's a mountain vineyard. It's got deep complexity. It's the vineyard, we pull it from Vogensen. It comes from one specific block called Barn Block, which is literally on a slate. We're having
Deb Piper, I need you to stop sharing your screen. For some reason, you're able to do that right now. There we go. Got it.
I'm super interested in what's going on at Deb Piper's house now, though. I'm just running. We got to come hang out.
It was pretty awesome. Yeah. Lights already.
So yeah, with Wallace Ranch, which is what I've got in my glass right now, I think Ian put together a nice food pairing for this, and he'll tell us a little bit about the vineyard.
Yeah. So hey everybody, it's so good to see your faces. I gotta tell you, it's been a little bit since I've done a virtual, but how awesome all of your homes look in the backgrounds and the Dry Creek Vineyard posters. And it's one thing to have you guys come and visit us, but it's kind of like you're visiting, or I'm visiting you in your home. So thank you for all the support and enjoying the wines. So along with the 4 wines that we're going to taste, or the 3 wines we're doing today, I want to touch on the K&D Mercantile, the spices and things that were sent that some of you had decided to order as well. I decided I'm doing 2 dishes. I'm going to do the Vogensen, and I'm also doing the DCV7, the first one we're going to start with. And I used the Adobo rub. Don and Kim love the Adobo. I think more so Don than Kim. Loves that spice and all that oregano. There's a little bit of citric acid. There's that nice sea salt. There's a little bit of turmeric, garlic, chili powder. It's perfect. What Robert was saying about the Wallace being very light and subtle and pretty. Sometimes your food pairings, you don't want to overpower them. It's all about, there's 2 things when it comes to pairing foods, and it's contrast or they complement. And I definitely, with this chicken that I put together, it was probably one of the better chickens I've made. And sometimes I don't know if it's just who I'm cooking for, or it's the energy in the room, or probably the spices, or maybe the wine. It's probably all 3 of them. It comes across really well. The subtlety of the Wallace, which is directly right outside the parking lot here. It's absolutely fantastic. I think there's a photograph that Sarah might have to throw up here. So Wallace is on the Heritage Clone, which is about 13 roses in that fall off the hillside right out front. This is right outside. I believe it got picked about a week and a half ago, and it's ripe and ready. But it's nice and light and pretty. People always talk about, Pinot and pizza or whatnot, but Zinfandel and a little bit of spice is perfect. So this question there, it's interesting seeing turmeric and other Indian spices show up in barbecue recipes. I think that, everybody's a little bit more of a foodie than they were a couple of years ago, and everybody wants to know what's in their wine, and everybody wants to know what's in their food. And it's nice to experiment with a little bit of different ingredients that we can get a hold of out here. I want to talk about my chicken, because the chicken in this wine were fantastic. So I chose to do both of mine on my Traeger, which I will not push out too much. So welcome to my home. That's my living room, or my kitchen there. So I start my bird a day ahead of time. I pull a whole chicken from the store, grabbing the California free range, happy indigenous California chickens. I always cut the back out, and I always do the spatchcock method. So you take your bird, you're gonna cut the back out the bird. You can also, if you're not interested in doing this, you probably know that you can have your butchers do this at the shop. They're more than happy to do that. But I always keep all of mine so that I can make stock for the winter time, because it's time for soup here in a few weeks and a few months. So cut the back out of your chicken, and then fillet that chicken open, and then just take your big chef's knife and just put a little crack like you would to split that breastplate, because you want to kind of fan this open. So the day before, I take the chicken. I grabbed, and not joking, people say they like garlic, and they're like, oh, the recipe calls for 2 things of garlic, and they put 4. I put 30. I took 30 cloves of garlic. I mashed it up, cut them, diced it all the way up. And then I take my fingers, I get up underneath that skin and kind of create a little pocket that's in there. I shoved a whole bunch of garlic and a little bit of that, the adobo powder in there, up underneath the skin. And then I melted down some butter and just put them on my fingers and rub butter all up in the inside so I can get that skin nice and crispy, right? Do that to both sides and the legs. Throw it in the refrigerator for the night. Make sure what happens, and I keep it uncovered. And when you do that, it kind of tightens up the skin a little bit and tightens up the flesh. Pull it out. I take a little bit more of my garlic. And the other thing too is that right before you're getting ready to cook, it's very important to have everything ready before you start. I believe the French pronunciation is mise en place, which is everything in its place. Barbecue can be messy. It can be very sloppy. There's, everybody's got all kinds of techniques, whatnot, but you always see the best chefs have everything ready at their disposal. Everything's set up. So before I even turn on I pull my chicken from the refrigerator. I let it sit for about 20 minutes. In that 20-minute time period, I'm heating up my Traeger. I'm grabbing my foil. I'm grabbing my foil pan. I've got my tongs. I've got my towels. So I usually, I use a little bit of the bleach towels to clean my hands for sanitation for, chicken. It's usually you don't want to hit the danger zones. I swear and live by the digital thermometer. If you do not have a digital thermometer, you are missing out. And does everybody have a digital thermometer at their house? All right, that's a great sign. Yeah. Steve Kern's got one. Perfect. I live and die by that thing because barbecue can be, I don't care if you're doing Traeger, I don't care if it's on a smoker or if it's on a grill. You can have one temperature that says, oh, the grill's 350 degrees and you're only getting kind of an internal temperature of the area that you're cooking on, but you're not getting an internal temperature of what your food is at. I don't like anything overcooked. I don't like things undercooked. So chicken is usually, for me, it's 160, right? 160 is the magic number for chicken. I want to keep moisture in there, and that's when I keep my digital thermometer and have that ready. So I think that the most important tool that you have, other than your grill, is having a nice, clean, sharp chef's knife. Number one, right? You got to have a knife. Most people, I've been to a lot of barbecues. I've seen some scandalous things happen when somebody's got an unsharp knife and they're trying to kind of get things ready or whatnot. It's a bad way to start. So get a good, clean, sharp knife. Like what the question with, or the comment with all of the different spices that are out there, it's important to experiment too. It's important. So experimentation is definitely, you never know what you're going to come across, and you'll find something that's awesome and magical, and then look, you're the new barbecue master, and that's fun, and everybody's like, well, what'd you do there? That was fantastic. Like, I'm not gonna lie to you, Mr. Conard's wings have continually blown my mind, and I'm not making that up. I eat a lot of chicken wings. I'm a connoisseur of the wing, and I think it was Robert's birthday party, and we went over there and literally grabbed, I'm like, oh yeah, somebody's just doing wings on the grill. I pulled 3 or 4 and I literally walked around. It was kind of like I had a moment to myself, and I had to beg and plead and ask for that recipe, and he gave it to me. I don't know if he's going to give it to all of you. Maybe down the road. We'll see.
Can I jump in real quick? I got a new recipe. I think it went out in the Bordeaux and the Zen Lovers Wine Club brochure. Is that right, Sarah?
Yeah, it went out in one of the most recent club newsletters, and we did actually just post it on our website. And I think we sent it to you when we sent the Zoom link out. So you guys have the treasured Robert Conard's.
So that's that's not the buffalo wing recipe. That's this new, I got on this whole Polynesian kick, which I'll talk about on my ribs in a minute. But it's sort of like an orange sesame kind of wing, and yeah, we'll share all that with you. And then just before I hand it back to oh God, they're so good, you guys. These are the orange sesame. No, these might just be hot wings. These are actually just buffalo wings. But at any rate, before I hand it back to Ian, I can't reiterate enough what he said about knives. I know I'm looking at some pros out there, out in the barbecue world, but I went so far as to, I bought my own knives that I keep in a little chef's knife bag that I don't let stay in the kitchen. Like I break it out to barbecue, I cut all my stuff with it, I clean them, and then I hide them back out in the garage because I don't want them being used as letter openers or blunt instruments or anything like that. So yeah, a good knife is gonna change your brisket and your tri-tip game like monstrously. All right, I'm
All right, thanks, Robert. Yeah, I think and overall what we're speaking about tonight, I think the one thing I see people make a big mistake in is just not letting their food rest. Barbecuing is sometimes everybody's like, what time's dinner gonna start? Whenever the food's done. That's my always answer. You gotta give meat time to rest. There's nothing worse. Meat's expensive. Meat is expensive now. And if you go out and buy a bunch of steaks and you buy a couple birds and you're doing the thing and everybody's running around and somebody's got to go and the food's ready when it's ready. Let it sit for 15, maybe 10, 15 minutes, depending on the cut. Myself, and I'm sure Mr. Conard, we spoke today, like my brisket, I let sit for about 2 hours. Giving that time to that meat to let it loses the moisture, it tightens up, and then it kind of pulls it all back in. Barbecue is the art of patience, and that definitely will test it. I want to hear about Mr. Conard's ribs. Let's get into the next wine. Oh, I got a question. What type of pellets, hickory or apple? For my Traeger, I think this is a great opportunity to get into the different types of barbecuing, and we'll talk about all of that. Mr. Conard.
Yeah, so before we go further, let's do a little show and tell. Let's ask some questions and see who's doing what. So who out there is following like a barbecue page on social media like Facebook or Instagram, or following somebody on like YouTube channels or anything like that? Show of hands. Lee, of course you are. Yeah, there we are.
He's probably got
a little bit. Yeah, I cheat on I was following right now I'm following one on Facebook that's just like a general barbecue page that seems to be kind of fun and engaging, and there's all kinds of different people with different rigs that are doing different stuff, everything from like just hibachis and old school Weber charcoal grills, all the way to gas grills, to pellet smokers, to electric pellet smokers, to propane heated pellet smokers. And Lee, you got to answer me the question. We were going back and forth, and you said you decided on a pellet smoker, but you didn't. No, you didn't. So you don't mind the pellet smoker, but you didn't like the electric option. Like electric let you down at some point or something. Yeah. Okay. So there's a lot of different rigs out there, and I currently I used to work on an offset wood smoker. So basically it's a barrel smoker that had an offset heat compartment where you used your heating woods, and then you used your flavor woods to add flavor to them. Ooh, we made Santa Maria tri-tip with Wallace pairs nicely. Yeah, I would bet that does. And I found that I was working really hard to maintain temperature. You know, I was constantly putting new wood in. I was trying to cheat ways to get flavor extraction from my flavor woods. You know, apple and cherry and hickory are kind of my go-tos. And I use apple and cherry on a lot. I cook a lot of pork and I cook a lot of chicken, and those are kind of my go-to flavor woods. And I was just finding I was wrestling out there with this barrel smoker all the time. Like if I was doing, you know, a brisket, I'm sitting on top of this thing for 16 hours or something, adjusting airflow. Yeah, no, it was miserable, you know, and yeah, you know, it was kind of like I enjoyed doing it, but by the time I was done, I was just beat. I was too tired to have fun eating the food. And I got to admit, if you're having a glass of wine or a bottle of beer or anything while you're out barbecuing for 16 hours, that can be a very, very long day. And yet I was tried and true. You know, I got my grill over here, and then I got my smoker over here, and I was dead set against these pellet smokers. You know, I was dead set against the Traegers and all these things. And Ian went and bought a Traeger during COVID, when nobody was doing anything, and we all started kind of kicking the rims on our house and figuring out what we could fix up around the house. Ian had purchased a Traeger. He said, "I think I'm going to pull a trigger on a Traeger." And
I caught the third degree from everybody. And
I called him. This is going to be me admitting publicly that I was wrong, but I called him every demeaning name on the planet. I can't believe electric pellet smoker. I can't believe, give me back your man card, blah, 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 blah. And I was relentless. And then he says, he cooks a few things. He cooks like a tri-tip and some chicken, and it looks really nice. And then one day we're at work, and he says, tonight I think I'm gonna throw a brisket on. I'm gonna do my first brisket on a Traeger. And I was like, oh, okay, well, let me know how that goes. And so the next morning, midway through the day, he's sending me these pictures and posting this brisket that he's done. That's got great color to it. The cuts, the ring looks amazing. And how does it taste? And he says it's amazing. It's super tender. And I said, so how did that process work? Knowing full well that cooking a brisket is anywhere from like a 12 to a 16, 18-hour cook, depending on what your digital meat thermometer is telling you. And he says, well, I threw it on about 10 o'clock at night, and then I went to sleep, and I was like, you went to sleep? You went to bed? Like all the things that could go wrong. And he's like, yeah, so I got up about 6 in the morning, and I took it off and I wrapped it, and I put it back in, and that was, I'm 52 now, and that moment right there changed my opinion about I like everything. I'm like, you can sleep, you don't have to sit in front of something for 15, 16 hours. And so it was later that year, 2020, that I went out and bought a Traeger. I started playing this little game with myself in the boredom of COVID. Ian and I both bowled together in a bowling league, and I figured that I was spending about, between bowling at league and then going an additional time during the week, that I was spending about $100 a week on bowling, having food there, bowling, having drinks and whatnot. And so when COVID happened and everything shut down, I just had this idea that I was just going to take that $100 that I was spending on bowling, and I was just going to put it in a little box. And well, how long, we're still in the midst of it now, but how the bad part of it, how long that went on. So it wasn't long at all before I had $1,200, $1,500, $1,600 in a box. And I got to go and make the choice and admit to Ian that he was right and I was wrong. And I went out and bought a Traeger. Mine's bigger than his. And and it's been a game-changing, super fun cooking experience. It has brought this, not Traeger name brand, whatever you're using out there. Mine just happened to be Traeger because I was able to get it at my local Ace place. But it's brought fun back into slow cooking for me, and so it's been a really exciting time. So that's what I'm using, a Traeger, and I'm using a grill. Just show of hands real quick, who's doing a pellet smoker?
1, 2, 3.
Fantastic. Who's using a hard wood? Who's using like a wood fire smoker? Fantastic. Who's using charcoal? Damn, Lee, I'm trying to crack the nut that what are you cooking with down there? Who's using I've gone over charcoal, I've gone over wood, I've gone over pellets, propane, just gas grill. Yeah, I got that too.
But yeah, Piper mentioned, what about the BGE? That's the big green egg. That's the charcoal. Big green egg. That's it's kind of like it's the Mercedes of the Weber charcoal grill, if you will. They're very, very well insulated.
Yeah.
It's definitely a different system when it comes to, your fire or your fuel or whatever. But the charcoal is definitely a slow burner. You have to buy the special charcoal, I believe.
No, they use wood. They use wood in the green egg, I believe. Oh, yeah. Somebody want to type in?
Because I can plug it in and get the
wood chips. Thank you, Lee. Lump charcoal, fantastic. Yeah, I've got the grill behind me. I've got the pellet smoker, and then I have the old school Weber, the big dish one that takes the charcoal that I have on the side of my house that I'm sure is going to save my life when the fall of civilization happens and I nothing else works, and I know that tried and true is gonna work for me. So I am gonna real quick. I just wanted to check in with everybody about the different types and what it's such a fun hobby, and so I'll jump back onto the wine and the next thing that I decided to cook. So I went with 4 clones. I was talking about how I felt that that's a Zinfandel that's really right down the center of the pipe. It exemplifies everything that I really love about Zin. It's got that great fruit to it. And that's one of the things that's so cool about Zinfandel and barbecue is I'm going to use the word sweet. All our wines are fermented dry, but there's a sweet, fruity tanginess that happens in Zinfandel that makes such a great pairing for barbecue and barbecue sauces and things like that. So I knew that I was going to want to do this wine, and I wanted to play around with a new ribs recipe. Does everyone here do the 3-2-1 or know about the 3-2-1 ribs recipe? Yeah, you know. Okay, all right, cool. So this is why YouTube and at least one social media page is good, because the stuff piles onto your feed and you learn new stuff. So 3-2-1, I've never done it with beef. I'm not a beef rib kind of guy. And Ian is. When I talk about ribs, I'm almost always talking pork ribs is what I like to cook. And 3-2-1 is basically you prep your ribs, you get your mustard powder on there first. I usually let that sit by itself for like a couple of hours just to kind of open up the meat and give you a layer of seasoning. And then you throw on your dry rub. For this particular one, I used the K&D Dry Creek rub and a 50-50 mixture of that and brown sugar. I play around with my pork and my chicken. I'm almost always looking for kind of a sweet, tangy kind of a thing. So I play around with brown sugar in my rubs a lot. So I did a 50-50 blend of both of those. I did 3 racks of ribs, rubbed it in, and I let it sit overnight. Oh, that's the end product there. What I was going for is a Polynesian style, and I'll get to how I got there. And as you can see, the bone literally fell out when I was done. So the 3-2-1 people, if you look it up on, if you just do a Google search, you're going to come up with 20 different recipes, and it's basically this: 3 hours on slow heat. So we're doing 225, 3 hours with just the ribs and the dry rub. And then at 3 hours, you pull it off. Like Ian said, I'm going to have everything prepped. I have all my aluminum foil. I've got a big stainless steel work table that's just to the right of my barbecue. And I use little magnets. So I just will get a nice strip of aluminum foil. I've cheated, and I figured out that they make 18-inch wide aluminum foil as opposed to just the regular stuff, which is great for wrapping big pieces of meat and ribs and stuff like that. So I prepped out 3 nice chunks of aluminum foil on the table to the right of me. After 3 hours of the ribs just cooking directly with the dry rub at 225 in the smoker, I open it up, pull the racks of ribs off, shut the thing, keep it at 225, and just gently wrap everything. I should back up. During the 3 hours, I have a spritzer that I'm using. Normally, I use a little water bottle with a mister on it. Normally, I do a 50-50 mix of apple juice and Alhambra or some good, not tap water, some good water. I do a 50-50 mix. On this, I was wanting to play around with this kind of Polynesian sweet and sour. I was kind of inspired by like Korean barbecue style sauce. So the pineapple popped into my head, and I thought, oh, that's going to be fun to play with. So I got a can of pineapples, just your regular sliced pineapples like this. And so the spritz that I did 25% apple juice, 25% the juice from the can of pineapple, and then the last 50% with that clean Alhambra water. So during that 3-hour portion of the 3-2-1 smoke, during the 3 hour, every 30 minutes, I'm pulling up the top and I'm spritzing it down liberally with that sort of sauce to keep the meat moist and whatnot, and shutting it down. After 3 hours, I pull everything off on the aluminum foil. I mist it again, and then I wrap it nicely, always cooking with the bone side down, the meat side up. Then I throw it back in the smoker wrapped in aluminum foil, so it's going to maintain all of that juice. I also should mention that I took the pineapples at this time. I took the sliced pineapples and I literally placed them on the ribs and then wrapped the aluminum foil in it. My hope was that the juiciness of the pineapple was going to, as it cooks, sort of extract itself into the meat and keep the meat really moist. So then 2 hours on the 3-2-1 cook, 2 hours at the same temperature, wrapped in aluminum foil. and just leave it alone. You don't need to spritz it or anything like that. I spritzed it before I put it in the aluminum foil, and I'm not going to be able to do anything because it's covered now. So basically, you take your 2-hour break and you do what you need to do around the house and come back in 2 hours. During that time, I prepared what was going to be my mop, what the barbecue sauce was going to be. So I mentioned that I was inspired by this kind of Hawaiian, Polynesian, Korean style kind of sweet, tart barbecue flavor that I was looking for. So I found KC Barbecue makes just a standard barbecue that's called a Hawaiian barbecue sauce. I don't know if you can get it in your neck of the woods. And I went into the Asian food section of my local grocery store, and I just got sweet and sour, like sweet and sour sauce that you use to cook stir fry or something with. So I took that, and I took the KC barbecue Hawaiian sauce, and I did a 50-50 mix of half sweet and sour and half of that Hawaiian pineapple barbecue sauce, mixed that together and came up with something that was really sweet and tart and had a great flavor to it. So after the 2 hours on the foil, I prepped a cookie sheet. If anybody else is cooking on a Traeger, one of the first, in my old offset barrel smoker, I had this tray in front of the smoker that I kind of lived on for all of my prep stuff. And when I bought a Traeger, the one thing that I was bummed about is you just have the barrel. It doesn't have a shelf or anything. So it took me about 42 minutes to figure out that you could buy an accessory for your Traeger. And there's a folding shelf that I now have that's like a game changer. So I queued up a cookie tray there, opened up the Traeger, took my aluminum foils off, dragged my tray over to my prep table, shut the smoker down, keeping it at 225, unwrapped my aluminum foil. The pineapples looked amazing. They had done exactly what they were supposed to do. They were a little cooked, but with a little less liquid in them, but being that it was in aluminum foil, I knew the liquid didn't go anywhere except for into that meat. Then I took my mop, my barbecue sauce, and I mopped over the ribs on the top. I left the backs dry. And then I kind of cheated because I stuck these stupid pineapples on there. So I had to kind of lift each pineapple and mop a little bit of barbecue sauce under there. And then you take the unwrapped, mopped in barbecue sauce ribs, and that's your last hour. At 225, directly back on the smoker again, and you cook them for an hour. And I was really excited with what came out. The neighborhood, my neighbors around me, devoured these racks of ribs in no time at all. And they ended up looking like the picture that Sarah posted. And I'm pretty sure. So full disclosure, they were amazing. I mean, just look at that; they were absolutely amazing. But full disclosure, I think with all the sauce and everything that I used, these are probably like 300 calories a rib. So you're definitely looking at like a cheat day meal. I served it up with corn on the cob and just a simple coleslaw, and I paired it with 4-clone Zinfandel, and it worked out well. I didn't talk much about the wine. 4 Clones is one of my favorite Zinfandels that we make. They all are. I work here for a reason.
We got a couple minutes, Robert. I mean, I think when I look at, so I think Robert, his style is a little bit more, you're a little more saucy than I am. Yeah. I think what's nice about when you add things like the pineapple and, a lot of the Asian influence of those ingredients, there's a lot of that umami happening. There's a lot of different flavors that work really well together. You slapping that pineapple on there throws the acid on there, and the acid definitely cuts the richness of how that brown sugar that you put on there kind of balances things out. That's what it's all about. And the wine is usually just it's a little kiss at the end of the night. It's like, it's perfect. It all works out. I have been to those barbecues, and I'm 41. I have stood in front of some fires for quite some time, and I've made some really bad barbecue. I'm like, okay, I've got the meat, I've bought the sauce, I've got the fire, let's do the thing. And then it's just not good. But it is about making mistakes and figuring out how this stuff works out and how it's balanced. So I think that's something that's nice about, like, everybody right now, just half you guys on this video are breaking bread, eating wine and drinking, at home. It's fantastic. Like, that's what this is about, is enjoying your time. It's a cheesy saying, but I was like saying, I think wine is kind of like the modern campfire. It's something that the conversation we can all kind of gravitate around, but it might not be about the food or the wine. but it's all about the company. And that's what's been kind of missing from everybody's lives lately. So yeah. Anything else you want to add about your ribs there, Mr. Conard?
I want to give a shout out to Peggy Person. The KC Masterpiece sauces. You know what I'm going to do? I don't have a. I think that's the name of the brand that I bought. What I'll do is after we're all done here, I hope y'all are members of our wine club Facebook page. So I'll start posting pictures there, and we can just have a big long conversation about, you know, different stuff. And I'll get a picture of that actual sauce because I have it at my house, so that you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. And to my Kansas City people, my daughter just started at K-State, Manhattan, Kansas. Go Wildcats! Super happy about that. I just spent like 4 days out in Manhattan, and my wife is out there right now. So it took me a second. This is how dense I am. It took me a second to figure out, because Patrick Mahomes is such a big deal, like nationally, you know. And I'm at this pub on campus, and there's just all of this Chiefs gear everywhere, and it doesn't dawn on me until, like, I don't know, probably an hour later. I'm like, oh yeah, it's not just Wildcats. This is Kansas City Chiefs territory. Fantastic. So I'll get that picture for you. I'll put it up on the Facebook page.
Beautiful. Okay, back to me. I'm a West Coast guy, so I'm just going to say it. I love tri-tip. A lot of people, and my brother's a butcher over in Jacksonville. He hates it when people from California come on vacation to Florida because he has them come in and request tri-tip all weekend long. He's like, oh, we're on vacation. Let's do some grilling. Let's get some tri-tip. Something I didn't know about tri-tip is that there is only one piece of that cut per cow. It's only one. Every cow only gets one piece of tri-tip. So every time I cook a tri-tip, I try to think about that animal and kind of do it the justice that I believe that it deserves. It's not a cheap piece of meat. I think right now, a 2.5 pound thing of tri-tip is going for about $50. So take your time. Can you throw up that photograph of my lovely, lovely, precious tri-tip? So tri-tip on its own, this is something that I absolutely think is one of the best cuts. Yeah, I'm not a big fatty meat guy. I love ribeyes, but sometimes there's too much marble in them. I sometimes am more of a New York strip guy because I just want to get to the meat. I don't want to pay for fat, even though sometimes that's where the flavor is at. I don't want to eat it and whatnot. So this tri-tip I started out one time before, a day ahead of time. The honey that we have here on property, I took that honey home, let it get, put it a little scoop in a pan and heated it up just a little bit and rub down. Before I even get started, I just rub it down with a little bit of that honey and I throw it back in the fridge and I let it sit for a couple minutes. So the spice I used for this was the mushroom rub, the K&D mushroom rub, and the Dry Creek Valley rub. Now there's a little secret that I added in here as well. It's something that we drive past all the time and we don't really think about it, but there's tons and tons of wild fennel that grows out here. So I went out over across the road from my house and I collected a little bit of fennel pollen, those little yellow flowers, and I grabbed the flowers, I brought them home, threw them in a paper bag and let them dry out for about 2 or 3 days, bring them out, and you shake the bag a little bit and all that pollen comes out the top. Well, I collect that and I threw that on there as well. So as I'm getting my grill or my trigger up to 225, I forgot to clean it. That's a big mistake. I made a huge mistake before I even got started. I didn't clean the grill, and now here I am. I've got this piece of meat going. So that's my other piece of advice for you folks. Make sure everything's clean before you get going, especially if you're using the pellet smokers or you don't want any old ash that's going to blow around in there on your food. It doesn't taste very good. So I get everything cleaned up. I'm ready to go. I take the K&D seasoning. I kind of grounded it down a little bit in a little mortar pestle just to break up the fennel seed, and a little bit of the sun-dried tomato that's in there. There's a little bit of citric acid and a little chili. And you kind of like, the mushroom rub I haven't cooked with a whole bunch, but I want it like probably 60, 40. 40% of the mushroom rub, 60% of the Dry Creek rub. And then of course the little fennel, the pollen seeds that are on there. So 225 for roughly about, it's about 2 hours, right? So in the meantime, I've got 2 hours to kind of smell what's going on inside the grill And then I'm also pouring myself the Vogensen. Now the Vogensen is the Vogensen's probably one of my favorite wines. You guys know they're all good, but I love there's a beautiful masculinity that comes with the Vogensen because it's intense, but it's still very round and very fruit 100%. So this is a shot of the Vogensen Vineyard, which is up on the very northwestern part of Dry Creek Valley. It's about 800 feet up off the valley floor. We get sunshine all day long. I mean, the terrace hillsides, we get the sun all day long, full sun exposure, pretty dramatic up there. And what that's going to give us is fully ripened fruit, full intense. I think this roughly it's about 25% French, Hungarian, and American oak, maybe 26%. But I think that's why this wine pairs so well with grilled meats and grilled vegetables, for those folks who are into veggies. I eat vegetables, you believe it or not. Right here, I got a pepper on the grill. There's proof right there. So while I'm smelling this, I've got my tri-tip is on there. The one thing about cooking low temperature foods that everybody needs to really need to tell yourself is don't look at it. Don't look at it cook. Let it sit. It's in, I promise you it's in there. It's not going anywhere. If you can, most of the folks that have got, the pellet smokers, they've got the internal thermometers that tell you can just push a button that tells you what the temperature is inside. I highly recommend a company called Meater, MEATER, and it's a little probe that you can put inside your meat, and you can just download the app. Yeah, like if Stefan's is giving me the thumbs up, that's more than I need for confirmation. I think it's about $100. They do sell a 3-pack, which I think is about $199. It's a little bit pricier, but if you're cooking a big piece of meat and you want to see where what one side of the meat is at temperature and the other one is needs a little bit more time, you can kind of cut the distance there.
Or if I could jump in real quick, Ian, or if you've got multiple pieces on, I bought the one, I looked at the 3-pack Traeger, the 3-pack meter, and I was like, oh, that makes the most sense to me. And then I could hear my wife in the back of my head going, what are you doing? What do you need 3 meat thermometers for, you insane person? And so I was like, yeah, you're probably right. So I just bought the one, and I immediately regretted it because you cook multiple briskets at a time, or you cook multiple pieces. So I'm always kind of cheating on that. So yeah, if you got the money, go with the 3-pack.
You're going to spend the money on the meat, and smokers are not cheap. Like the big green egg that we were talking about earlier, that thing's about $1,000. They're not cheap. All the accessories you have to buy through them, and so if you're gonna do it right, somebody's got one that's got 6 inputs, you're doing it right. You're living your best life. That's fantastic. Good. Yeah, send us the link. Okay. So there's something that, a lot of people with the folks, you've got more control over your temperatures. You can do reverse searing. I think that's something that's kind of relatively new within the past, maybe 5 or 10 years. Maybe it's just new to me. That's, so for example, I've got my tri-tip is on there. I've got a glass of wine. Life is great. But the outside of my steak needs a little bit of crust. I need a little bit of, I want to lock in those flavors. So I've got my thermometer in the meat. I'm looking at it climb slowly but surely. We get up to about 125. I'm pulling that meat right off there and right into my pre-assembled foil boat that I can slap that in there. I wrap it up, and I immediately run upstairs. I grab my cast iron. I drop a little bit of the K&D olive oil on there, and I put a little like a pat of butter, like just a little scotch. That keeps everything from burning right off the get-go. So get that oil nice and hot. You want to lock in those flavors. And when you're talking about reverse searing, we're literally talking just like you do. Who are my rare meat eaters out there? 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, Robertson, no go. 5. Yeah, I could eat a cow if it walked through the room if I had a fork and a knife. So I tend to let things go just a little bit more. So I want to let that. So I pull the steak out. I got the oil going right before it starts smoking just a little bit. I drop that nice, beautiful piece of meat in there, say its last goodbyes. I let it sit for a couple seconds, let it get a nice crust, kind of move the pan around just a little bit. And also, you got to let things cook. Don't keep moving around. My wife yells at me every time that I drop onions in the pan. She's like, don't touch them. Let them cook. They got to sweat out. Because I just want to pretend like I'm cooking and make the sizzle noise, because I feel like it's fun and important. Let it cook.
You want to talk about the Vogensen wine at all? Because I could talk about it all day.
Why don't you shoot off and talk about the Vogensen?
Yeah. So for me, Vogensen's at the far other spectrum of Zinfandel. So, we've got sort of Wallace and Vogensen on either sides of the spectrum. Vogensen lives out there with kind of the Beeson level of Zinfandel. It's big, it's brooding, it's full body. I mean, all Zinfandel is full bodied, but it has really dark, rich fruit to it. Whereas when we were at Wallace, you have a bit more red fruit. You have kind of bright cherry, and I get a little bit of cranberry. And then with 4 clones in the center, I kind of get a nice mix of both. There's both red and black fruit in there with spice. But Vogensen, coming from that hillside that Sarah had showed those pictures from, it's a really difficult place to grow grapes. It's a high iron content volcanic soil. There's this old saying that in order to make great wine, you have to make the vine struggle a little bit. So some of the best vineyards that we have are places that the vine really has to work to produce fruit. A grapevine's only on the planet for one reason, and that's to make grapes. It's gonna, regardless of what happens, it's gonna make grapes. If you put it in really fertile soil and water it a bunch, it's gonna make these big, fat, happy clusters that are gonna make horrific wine. If you put it in a place like Vogensen with this dense, high iron content, volcanic soil, when it gets wet, it gets almost thick and clay-like, and the vines, there's not a lot of water running through there. So the vine's having to work really hard to find water and nutrients. And what it finds, it's pumping into those clusters. So all the energy that it can muster from its leaves and the roots are going into these clusters. So the clusters tend to be small. You've seen our grape clusters when you've been here on property. They're like a third of the size of table grape, probably less than that of table grape clusters. The berries are small. If you've ever picked a berry off and eaten it, you found that the skins are thick and there's juice and seeds there. So all of that, is the flavor profile of the wine. So when you have a vineyard like Vogensen that's planted in dirt like this, that's up at that elevation that Ian was talking about, 800 feet by like Napa Valley standards, isn't very high. Vogensen Ranch is about like 1,700 to like 1,200 at the top of the ridge. 800 feet by, Napa standards, not really high. But here in Dry Creek Valley, we have this little, we talk about the early morning fog sort of blanketing the grapevines. And we don't have Russian River level of fog, but probably 2 to 3 days a week, we have a fog that comes in. There's a little microclimate that's created out there at Lake Sonoma. And that will come in and it will blanket all of the valley floor. Exactly. I love this. I see this like 2 or 3 times a week when I come in, and it's one of my favorite things. But you can see how this fog is rolling in, and it's going to cover these vines here. And the sun's not going to break through until around 11 o'clock or so. So for these lower benchland and valley floor vineyards, they get a little more time to stay away from the sun. And what that means is they're going to have a little more ripening time. They're going to have a little more hang time to develop flavor profiles and whatnot. Wallace Ranch is one of the, it's one of the most exotic, sort of elegant Zinfandels that we make. And yet Wallace is one of the last vineyards that we harvest every year because of this fog layer here. Vogensen, up at 800 feet, is just above that fog layer. So like it gets sun, Ian alluded to it, pretty much all day. So they get ripe up there. The fruit gets dark and extracted and very bold. And so long answer to a short question, that's how I would describe Vogensen. I think that it flirts with a Cabernet level of body. It just has Zin flavors as opposed to the cassis and stuff that you find in Cabernet. So here again, I can say for all 3 of these wines, these are all my favorite Zinfandels.
Well, Miss Sarah, what do you think? We should talk. Anybody want to have any questions?
You know what I realized is I never got up the picture of your finished tri-tip.
I didn't know if we had time. Let's take a peek at that real quick.
I was gonna say, I feel like
Can you show that one picture that has the wow. Yeah, look at that. I did that. I'm pretty happy.
Nailed it.
Will you show the picture of the knife in the meat before it's cut? I think there's something I see a lot, and I want to make sure that this is.
I don't think I have that picture. I only have 2 of the tri-tips.
Oh, so okay. For example, this photograph right here, there's 2 different parts to a tri-tip. A lot of people will just grab a tri-tip, pull it off the grill, let it rest, and then just slice it up all the way across. There's a different texture on the left-hand side towards the one that's closer to the bottom there. Thank you, Stephanie. That's very kind of you. The part on the right is the tip. All right. So that's just you. So you've got that piece of meat, right? Let's pretend my hand is the tri-tip, right? You're going to take your knife. Actually, I'll just use my knife. Here's my knife. You're going to cut that tri-tip right about here, right? And the first part that's on this side here, this is going to be the part that you're just going to easily slice up down the middle. The back end, the larger piece of a tri-tip, you want to cut that, and then you're going to turn that piece of meat, right? So that's, you want to kick, just like on a brisket, there's a couple different ways you want to cut things. It's not just like, well, we've got it off the grill, let's just cut it into pieces and then we serve it. The marbling is different on the larger end part of a tri-tip. There's not a, it's not a uniform cut like a fillet and whatnot. You can, yeah, thank you, awesome. So that's about the spot where, and it varies tri-tip to tri-tip. They're all different, but you're gonna cut that piece in half. Take the other piece to the right hand side and let that sit on the right. The part on the left, turn it about 90 degrees and then turn outside, and then you can slice it. And then I'm telling you, it's a much better texture than the other way, right? If I just use this knife and cut it like this, it's great, it's good, but the marbling's different and it's a whole other experience, a whole other taste, right? What kind of knives? I'm not gonna, so cheap is expensive. Cheap knives are an expensive mistake. I've learned the hard way by buying cheap knives. You'll end up buying, they don't stay sharp for very long. They're dangerous to cut with. You're gonna yeah, we're just having a couple beers and a couple drinks and we're gonna get out the knives. And then next thing you know, the party's over and you're on your way to get your hand stitched up. Keep your knives sharp. A sharp knife is a safe knife. I recommend as far as what I've got, there's a couple that I've got. What are the Swiss knives? Why can't I remember the name of my knives? I got a set for my birthday, and those are the forged to fire knives. Those I think I got from Amazon, but I do like the Shun. Shun is a very, very good knife. That I think I paid like $1.50 for, $150. But I think I usually will drop them off at the local butcher and they'll sharpen them for me, because yeah, that's it right there. Those knives are fantastic. Yeah, Jenny made a comment in the chat there. Those are the knives I've got. I've got the filleting knife. I've got the butchers. I've got the big mean looking axe. That's great for breaking down turkeys. It's much faster. Everybody has like the regular knives to break down turkeys. Give me the big knife. Let's get the work done. People are hungry. Yeah.
So Janet had one question about kind of what's the relation to Old Vine Zin? Where do you see Old Vine Zin fitting in this barbecue spectrum?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would put Old Vine Zin at the same section as I would have Vogensen and Beeson in. Old Vine is one of my go-tos like all the time. So our Old Vine Zinfandel is a combination of 6 different vineyards here in Dry Creek Valley that are all 100 years old or older right now. The oldest of those vineyards is the Beeson Ranch, which is, I believe, 136, 137 this year, which we do a single vineyard designate of, and the question is like, how long does a Zinfandel vineyard live? We're going to find out. We know that it lives at least 136 years, but Beeson Ranch, the tonnage is starting to get lower and lower. And my little analogy about old vines is they're kind of like, vines are a lot like people. When they're young, they're just throwing fruit everywhere. They've got a ton of energy. We have to farm the heck out of them to regulate them back, to produce the quality of fruit that we need them to produce. When they hit their like 20s and the 20s to like 50s, in my opinion, that's where they're at their prime. They're really, they're starting to self-regulate. They don't need as much farming. We still have to pay attention and drop fruit and whatnot, but the root structure is in there and they're producing really incredible fruit. The old vines, they start to self-regulate because they're gonna, like I said, a grapevine's going to produce grapes no matter what. That's why it's here on Earth. But I kind of equate it to, like, I don't know how your grandfather was, but my grandfather was a World War II vet, and he was a man of very few words. He didn't talk a lot. But when Grandpa sat down at the holidays to tell a story, everybody shut up because it was amazing. You know, he didn't talk a whole lot, but what he talked about was incredible. And there were these great stories. And that's kind of what old vine Zin is like. These vines don't produce a ton of fruit. You know, Beeson on a great vintage is producing about 2 tons an acre, whereas DCV6, which is across the street from the winery, our Malbec vineyard, which is a virtual clinic on how to farm grapes, literally to the way every vine is spaced in that row, we can get high quality fruit to make amazing wines upwards of 6 tons an acre. So anybody that's equating like tonnage to high quality wines these days just isn't farming correctly, because that's just a myth these days. But with Beeson was planted at the turn of the last century. So part of the problem is like they planted that vineyard not with a tractor in mind, but with like a horse and a trolley behind it and whatnot. So we've got, you know, shoddy spacing out there, and then these old vines just producing very little fruit, but the clusters that they produce, you know, there's a depth of flavor profile there that you just can't make that happens out in the vineyard. And I tend to find that the old vines are a little more bramily, they have a little more wild fruit characteristic, and definitely more spice and pepper with them. So yeah, that's how I would put Beeson, Old Vine, and Vogensen all kind of in that same area of really full-bodied, spicy Zinfandels.
Great. Well, I don't know about you guys, but I'm starving now. I'm very jealous of all the people that are eating while they're listening. I'm gonna go get some food myself. But I just want to say thank you again for showing up, for being here with us on our virtual tastings. We absolutely love this. We love to see your faces. We love to hear what you're doing at home while you aren't out here visiting us. So our next one is going to be on November 4th. It is on our website. We've got it all ready. We finalized the details today. It is a partnership with Antonelli's Cheese Shop. They're based in Texas. And the fun story behind our relationship with Antonelli's is that when COVID hit last year and the pandemic began, one of our club members organized a tasting for her family all over the country with Antonelli's Cheese Shop, and she invited Kim to be a part of it. And so that was our very first kind of public virtual tasting, if you can imagine that. And so we're very excited to partner with John. He's one of the co-owners. It's an independent cheese shop. We have 4 delicious cheeses, 4 delicious wines. So we'd love it if you would go out and support Antonelli's and join us for the tasting on November 4th with Kim. And then, as Robert mentioned, if you are a wine club member, which I see most of you are, but if you haven't joined yet, you should. And if you are and you have not joined our Facebook wine club group, you absolutely should, because I have a feeling that Robert and Ian are going to be talking all about barbecue for the next couple of days on there. And we'd love to see what you're making. We'd love to be able to share and talk and be able to have that community.
Absolutely. I would love to keep this conversation going. So tonight I'm going to post probably like a barbecue picture of something and probably post a recipe, and let's just keep the conversation going. I want to see what you guys are up to, and I want to see what you guys are cooking and all that stuff. So yeah, Facebook, the Dry Creek Vineyard Wine Club Facebook page. If you're a club member and you're not a member of it yet, apply to get on it, and we'll keep this conversation going. I'm sure Mr. Eddy's going to join me. Yeah,
Absolutely.
All right. Well, thank you guys so much again. It was so great to see all of you. Stay safe, stay healthy, and hopefully we will see you again soon.
Love you guys.
Hopefully we'll see you on the property.
We
And
appreciate
whoever
it.
said that barbecue party, let's do that. That's it. We can make that a thing. Let's make that happen.
That's a really good idea.
It's a great idea.
Love it. Have a
Yeah.
great
See you guys.
night.
idea. Yeah. I